You watched the broadcast. For you, what was the most inspiring or something that just you found noteworthy that the president said of all the many things that he talked about?
Well, I think the presidential address this morning was quite emotive for me, given the fact that the president seemed starting his address to remind all of us that the ambition to become Nigerian president didn't start yesterday. That actually started in 1992 when he contested as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in the aborted Third Republic. And the thing that drove him to politics was to see how to make life good for the average Nigerian. And it was on the basis of that that he sought election and that Nigerian voted for him. Now, the president also make us understood that, look, yes, he has taken the mantle of leadership because of the way the economy or life generally has been in the country. The government needed to take some very difficult decisions that is directly impacting people, whether from Broad Street in Lagos to the street in Kano to Nembe in Bayelsa State, to use his exact words, that he can feel the impact of these policies on the people, that a lot of people are suffering. And I think that admittance of the fact that presidents know that, yes, we are taking measures, but this measure is affecting the people. But he said it was necessary to be taken because in the last 40 years, we have been on this road and it has led us nowhere. So what is naturally necessary is to chart a new course for the people. And so what he's saying is that, yes, the conditions are bad, but it is not a ground for excuse for non-performance. And that's why he has consistently told Nigeria that he's also monitoring all the aides he has appointed to help bring Nigeria to a certain level of comfort. So we don't need to excuse that, oh, because situation is like this, we cannot perform. And so he has a special unit that is monitoring what everybody is doing and seeing that people are making direct impact into the society. But there's something that he said, which of course for me really also strike a very deep chord. When the president says, it is not the president alone or the governor that build nations. Nations are built by his people, by the diligence, the hard work of everybody. And I think this is very important on the first day of the year for us as a people. As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power. I used this analogy in some place yesterday. When you look at the GDP of Nigeria, about 460 billion US dollars GDP, the federal government only controls about 23% of the GDP. Now, the rest is in the hands of the private individuals that are doing well. And so the president says, we need to work hard. And he also says that, look, understand this principle. Why we are trying to build a nation is not to frustrate the rich people, but it's to create a level playing field for people to unleash their potentials and be able to make good from whatever God has given to us. And he said in all his travels since he assumed office, he has been on this drive to see how Nigeria can become a better place. How do we redistribute wealth so that those who are very poor are no longer so poor? But this is not to say that everybody is going to be equal, because hard work may not produce exact and same result, because that, of course, will depend on what output that you are going to produce. And so he has spoken to two critical issues this morning. The first one is the fact that he has sealed a deal with the German chancellor on Siemens so that to boost electricity. And this is very important, even for SMEs. There are a whole lot of people who have small business that they could do with electricity, but because it's not available, this has created a whole lot of gap. And the president says they are working very hard to see that this is addressed. Now, he also spoke to the issue, which of course he has raised the last week, issue of the Dangote refinery, that there is no more monopoly in terms of fuel production. Yes, they are fixing Port Harcourt refinery to work. Dangote refinery will be working, and other refineries have to come on board to ensure that there is availability of petrol at very reasonable price. And finally, he ended with the issue of the minimum wage, which I have spoken to. That is not just a matter of economic imperative, that it was morally right because it was overdue. So it speaks to the issues that, of course, and I feel that the nation want to hear. And this is also coming on the eve of the passing of the 2024 budget, which is tagged the budget of renewed hope. And we're looking and hoping and trusting that 2024 will be a good year for every one of us. That we're not going to leave the task of governance to the president alone. And of course, he has also extended the olive branch to those who contested with him in the last election. Elections are over. Let's stop the campaign. Let's put our ideas together. Let's put our head together. Because if the reason why we all contested was to make Nigeria good, now we can make that contribution. And I do hope that the opposition listened very well and they will be willing to support, so that we have to drop this pulling down syndrome. And all of us know that we need to build a nation together, nation that works for each and every one of us.
You know, I like the fact that the speech was quite strategic and stylish. You know, he started with motivation. You know, at a period like this, Nigeria, they've gone through a lot. And when you're starting the new year, it's important to motivate your team, which are Nigerians now. So I'm putting it this way. You have the team leader and the team. The team leader in this questionnaire is the president. And the team is, you know, Nigerians, the governors, and every other Nigerians who are going to be part of this activity. So he started with motivation. And the interesting thing, maybe you didn't observe, is he also made reference to the former president. Let me read that to you. Say, permit me to say a few words to my predecessor, President Muhammadu Buhari. You have been an honest, patriotic leader who has done his best for the nation you love. On a more personal note, you're a worthy partner and friend. May history be kind to you. Why do you have to make reference to the former president?
Yeah, but I think they are just only very important because they're real, very serious decisions too that the former president took, which previous regime had no courage to implement. Take, for example, the issue of TSA. Even the issue of oil subsidy. Mr. President had taken that step before the coming in of this new regime. Critical asset like the steel mill. There's so much investment in Anchor Power's program to ensure that Nigeria was self-sufficient in terms of food production. And really, to be very honest, you see, the level of importation of rice, for example, in Nigeria, had dropped drastically because there's a whole lot of production that is going on locally. There are rice processing mills everywhere. Even in Lagos now, we have a big mill. We have a big mill in Niger State. We have a big mill in Kebbi State. There's a big mill in Kano State. So there are mills scattered all around the place that, of course, we are beginning to actually grow the things that we eat. Now, of course, these are credits to the president. And, of course, one of the things that we cannot take away from the former president was the fact that he meant well, and, of course, he appointed people and gave them the freest of hand to help Nigeria. I used to say then that if any minister in the Federal Republic of Nigeria fail, he cannot attribute his failure to government or the president not giving him free hand to make decisions. People fail because they were not competent. Because that president gave everybody free hand. And of course, he was a lover of people and was doing everything to see how to carry people out of poverty. But unfortunately, he was not as lucky. And that's why sometimes when people are judging the president, they seem to be very harsh on him. And they forget so quickly that at the point that President Buhari was coming into power in 2014, things had become, 2015, things had become so bad that over 29 states in the Federal Republic of Nigeria could not pay salary. The president had to bail states out 3 times between 2015 to 2017. And while we were thinking we were settling down, COVID came. And COVID dried up all the gains that the regime would have achieved. And then toward the end, we saw the war with Ukraine and Russia also coming. So that president operated in a very hostile economic environment. And so it is difficult for people to really feel the impact. But the truth of the matter is that he has done his best. How Nigerians survived through this period, through the trial, and of course that there were no wages that were owed, and government was still able to do some fundamental critical infrastructure. Take, for example, buying off Ajata steel mill from the Indian company and settling all this. They were all good things that the president did, including winning the P&ID case, which would have cost Nigeria about $11 billion. So I think this is important, that when the president said that it was not for anybody and it was for everybody, he was actually for nobody, and that was why he didn't interfere in any politics. If you remember, some days ago when Adams Oshomole was at the book launch of the former DG of the Governors Forum, he made mention of this and was talking to Ganduje, and he said, well, I serve under a president who was not interested. And I hope that yours will not be like that. Because when the internal politics and crisis of APC was going on, the president maintained a neutral stand. And he did that at the primaries. So to allow and give everybody a free hand to contest. Now, if the president was to be interested on who become the president of Nigeria, probably Tinubu would not have emerged as president today. So and I think on the basis of all of this, it is good to pay homage and tribute to such a man who allow a level playing field and allow that politics to just say true.
Now, when the president was talking about building an equitable society and closing the inequality gap, how do you think that will be achieved?
Yeah, but it's possible. It's possible. What's the business of government? The business of government is to see how to use the instrument of states. For example, taxation, which of course it says that it's going to clean up so that it will be simple enough that everybody will be able to operate. That like he has gone and traveled everywhere and he has said to Nigeria that Nigeria is now open and ready for business, that people should come in. Now, government is putting in place measures to allow business to prosper and flourish. Now, what this means is that if businesses are flourishing and prospering, now everybody benefits. That's what it is. Now, that's what it's saying, that it does not mean that it's going to bring a kind of equality, that everybody is going to be at the same level of wealth. Now, what will distinguish one man from another is the level of creativity. I was saying to some young people yesterday that, look, the truth of the matter is that we have been trained to look out for government for job, and that's not helping us, because we're also seeing that things are changing. There's a whole lot of change around the way work is done today. And now what really singles people out is their creativity, is their innovation. Now, if we are able to innovate and be creative, of course, we can, of course, see new people who really, even if their parents were not wealthy, they are essentially emerge wealthy because you have created a brand that is globally appealing. I was telling somebody yesterday, now what we are not looking out for is the fact that if you want to get government contract, for example, you may need to know somebody. But if you want to get a business from Dangote, you don't need to know anybody. What you need is just excellence and create the right product that the businessman wants. So if you create that product and it's appealing to this businessman, he will be willing to buy from you. He's not looking at where you come from. He's not looking at the color of your skin. He's not looking at your gender. All he's looking for is that what product you have or what service you are rendering meets the need and will be able to add value to whatever thing that he's doing. And therefore, he will be ready to pay even premium for that kind of a service. Now, what we should be doing in this new year is for us to put our head down and think, of what kind of product we can sell to people who are dispassionate in terms of making decisions of who work for them. Dangote does not care. Otedola does not care. I'm not sure Tolu Elumelu cares where you come from. What is important to these people is that they have the right person doing the right thing, and then their businesses is prospering. So for us as Nigerians, the president has spoken to us. Let's go out there. Let us not be despondent. Let us understand that in every problem, there are opportunities that are laden in it. And what the president is saying to us is that our crisis should actually become the driver for our prosperity. And I think that is what it is. So once all of us can carry this mindset, you see the inequality which we're talking about will be reduced drastically and to the barest minimum.
Let's just see some of the highlights of the live broadcast. The president talked about the need to reshape the economy. He promised he's going to remodel the economy to enhance growth and development through job creation. You know, how significant is that? You know, it talks about putting an end to poverty, you know, and to ensure that the economy is better than the way it is, so that Nigeria will become the giant of Africa that it ought to be. How significant it is, you know, to remodel the economy at this time, you know, through job creation.
Yeah, but yeah, the real truth of the matter is that most of the challenges that we face today as a nation, they're all resulting from poverty and unemployment. That when people have nothing to live for, they can die for any cause. And so when you are seeing a lot of security challenges facing the nation, you are seeing a lot of difficulties, and you are seeing a lot of crime increasing or soaring, the only reason is because people are not engaged. Now, one of the issues that we must also realize is that the president is not just a socialist. He's a social capitalist, which means he does believe that if businesses prosper, the people will prosper. So when you create a leverage, because government should not really become the empire of labor, because government only creates a level playing ground for companies to be able to do well. And as long as the government is creating this platform for businesses to thrive, what do you see? You will see a lot of people taking off the streets. And as people are taking off the streets, the rate of crime goes down, the society becomes safer, and people have something they want to live for, and then they cannot just die for any cause. And I think this is what the president says, why I say, yes, let's see how to eliminate poverty. And the only way to actually kill poverty is to create wealth. And this wealth creation is not something that government is going to do alone. While government is creating the policy environment for businesses to thrive, the individuals who are in the streets with ideas must be able to take the initiative. And government is also seeing, how do we work with the commercial banks, for example? How do we work with the development bank, for example, to see we bring down the cost of capital, which is also at the moment on the rooftop. Now, if you reduce the cost of capital, chances are that you will have companies that are able to compete. And this is what problem has actually been in Africa, that you see companies that are coming from Asia, for example, company coming from Europe to operate in our climate, and they are competing with our locals here, and our local cannot compete. Reason because those guys are coming, and they are coming with capital at a single digit, and it's very ridiculously cheap, and we don't have it. Our capital is high. Now, by the time you put out what you're going to take from the commercial bank to do business, you find that you are not competitive against foreigners. And I think all these issues that government needs to address in its economic outlook for 2024 to say, number one, that lending rate go down drastically, so that the cost of getting capital by small business, big businesses are low enough such that they can become globally competitive in terms of production. Because these are the issues that the government must need to deal with, the macroeconomic environment. Now, once we can begin to become creative, and we can now begin to export, whether our services, whether our mind, whether our product or fiscal product, whatever it is, then of course we'll be able to earn enough foreign exchange. And that also will address the issue of the high exchange rate that faces the community. These are issues that government must need to address as the year rolls. And he was saying at the last meeting he had at the State House with some of the politicians, that is why he has had people like Cardoso with him. He called the headmaster. Wale Edun is there with him, and Bagudu is there. And with these people around him, that they don't have a reason to fail.
Now, there was something quite uncommon that the president talked about that his administration plans to do in the coming year. It says, quotes on him now, "We shall continue the efforts of the Buhari administration on infrastructure progress toward national works of roads, rail and ports shall get priority attention." Now, continuity is not a very common thing in governance in Nigeria. It's about, it's almost like one man does his own thing, another takes over and starts his own project. But continuing in the footstep or in the line of the previous administration regarding infrastructure, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's another unsung efforts of Buhari's regime that people really talk about. Buhari was not in a hurry to commission any new project for the 8 years. He was determined to complete all abandoned projects by his predecessors. And that's also a credit, because government is a continuum. Now, what you see happen in our climb is that when somebody comes into office, the first thing he's thinking is, "Oh, I want a legacy project." That was not the target of President Buhari. The target of President Buhari were there were all national assets that were abandoned in their thousands across the federation, and to see how we can use the little resources we have to ensure that we are able to fill this gap. Like Bode Augusto has said, Nigeria needs between $80 to $100 billion annually for the next 10 years to be able to meet the infrastructure gap in Nigeria, in terms of road creation, in terms of railway, in terms of viable airports, because all of these are critical to the wealth of nations. Now, you look at our airport, whether it's the Abuja airport, the so-called international airport, you look at Port Harcourt International Airport, look at Enugu International Airport, look at Lagos International Airport. They are small, small airports. And this cannot accommodate the size of the business or the economy we are talking about. Look at our port infrastructure. It cannot take care of the size of the economy we are trying to grow. And we don't even have access to these ports. There are no roads connecting them. We are still carrying things by the road. Rail tracks have not connected the major city in Nigeria. So all of these are huge deficits. And President Buhari was critical in facing this. And in short, some of his opposition actually were accusing him that he did not focus on the things that affect people. All that he was trying to do was to build physical infrastructure. He was accused of that at a certain point in his regime, that, it's not about building physical infrastructure. People must be alive to use those infrastructure. But we know that this is critical and this is important. So when Mr. President is saying that, look, we want to continue in this trajectory to see how we can upscale and upgrade the level of infrastructure across the country, I think there are things that are worth doing, and we do hope that in the coming years that revenue get better, and then of course government also able to enter into partnership with some other development agencies and bodies to be able to provide the infrastructure need for our nation.
Another striking thing is the president talked about impartial, adherence to the Constitution. He says Nigeria will be impartially governed according to the Constitution and the rule of law. There's this school of thought that argues that when it comes to the Nigerian space, it's not the absence of laws, but the implementation. That's where you have the challenge. That's where the problem is. What's your take on this in regard to what the president has said, that Nigeria will be impartially governed according to the Constitution and the rule of law?
Well, I think You are very right to submit that we don't have too much problem with a lack of laws. There are so many laws. What has actually been the problem is having the will or the guts to be able to implement the laws that you have written. And I think that is really the critical issue. Some people say, oh, the 1919 Constitution is so bad that nobody can operate it, but I don't believe so. Because we see the flagrant violation of these principles of the law. But I think the president can lead by example. And this will start if governments start to obey decisions of the court. And these decisions are obeyed such that other people see that government does not flagrantly violate court orders. But like somebody said yesterday, that it's also very heartwarming to know that in the 2024 budget, government has made so much room for the judiciary. And we're also hoping that we're going to have an impartial judiciary who will be able to interpret the Constitution such that it takes away suspicion from the public. Because if there's anything that has affected us as a nation, and I think Mr. President has also spoken to this some time past, and he said that the judiciary, they are very critical to even the economic viability of Nigeria. Because if judges continue to take money from people and put justice to sale, then of course, people will be afraid to do business with you. And so this is important. The president is speaking to the fact that he is not the one who should interpret the law. The interpretation of the law should start from the judiciary. This idea of people shopping for ex parte motions in the night should stop in Nigeria. Judges sit down on a Sunday night to grant an order just to ensure that something does not happen. That does not aid justice. And I think the judiciary need to be up to their game, because it's always said that they are the last hope of the common man. But what we have seen in the recent past does not suggest that justice has always been to the highest bidder, and people have even given up on the court system. I remember after the last Kogi election, and people were asking Dino Melai whether I was going to go to court, and he said, look, I'm not going to court. It will be foolhardy for me to go to court when I know that there's no justice in the court. Now, until we are able to actually take those suspicions out of the justice system in Nigeria, what Mr. President is saying cannot work. Because it is not in the place of Mr. President to determine what happens in the court. So the Constitution is there. So even if the president violates the terms of the Constitution, citizens should be able to take the president to the court. And the court, without fear or favor, should be able to rule against the president. Then you have an impartial constitution that is in place. So it's not in the letter now. It is the man who is the adjudicator of the process that need to become forthright and then do what is right. And I think that's what Nigeria needs. Now, once we see that the judges are right and the lawyers are now made to obey rules and make them simple enough, people can trust the judicial system, then we can see the Constitution work.